been a long 3 days, hasn't it? Are your brains full yet? No? Mine is. I want to just take a moment and thank Bruno for putting this amazing event together. He's got a great team. I've been loving Portugal. I've been loving Lisbon. You guys are great. This is fun. We will be back. In fact, what are you doing next week? So it's very hard to be the last presentation at a conference like this because they have all these incredibly great speakers who come up and talk about these incredibly great things, and by the time the day is done, all the good topics have been taken. So I decided that I'm just going to do my version of Beyonce's Single Ladies Dance. Stop that. It was the one thing nobody had done. Unlike Alan Cooper, I am a scientist. And I study how people design things. And I want to talk about this. This is a Zune. I bet you no one's talked about that. Okay? This is the Microsoft Zune HD. And it's a really neat device. It's got all sorts of incredible capabilities. And the folks at Microsoft, when they introduced it, they worked really hard to make sure that this thing was going to capture the MP3 player market. And it's interesting because they had a 7-year time period to study what Apple had done before they introduced their first Zune, and then they had 3 generations to go to get to this one. So they had a lot of chance to learn, to understand, and interestingly enough, it's got really cool hardware, it's got great sound, it's got networking, it can communicate through Wi-Fi, it's got great video capabilities. It's really a fabulous device. Just out of curiosity, how many people here either own or know somebody who owns a Zune? Okay, a small number of you. And how many of you ate eggs for breakfast? I'm sorry, that's somebody else's. And the Zune people have to compete against this. This is the SanDisk Sansa E-Series. And again, the folks at SanDisk, these guys know flash memory, and they created this really fast, really responsive system, great memory, great sound, really nice piece of hardware. How many people here either own or know somebody who owns a SanDisk MP3 player? Okay, a few of you. Yeah, they're a little bigger in the U.S. market. And of course, these guys have to compete against this. Right? This is the iPod. Just out of curiosity, just to fill it out, how many people either own or know somebody who owns an iPod? Okay. So that's what they're up against. Right? It's just incredible. Now, I mean, we can check this against market statistics, right? The Zune, when it came out, has 5% of the market now. Not too bad, not too shabby, after only being out for about 4 years. SanDisk, they've managed to capture 7% of the market. But the iPod, it's got 75% of the market, right? And it's an inferior piece of hardware. That's the important thing to remember here. Technically, this is not very clever. It's the whole line. There are some interesting things about it, but the sound isn't great. The software is sluggish. You cannot delete a file from the thing, right? If you want to delete a file, you actually have to load up a piece of software to do that. You can't on another computer. You have to use 2 computers to delete a file. What designer would permit that? It's crazy, right? Renaming files, changing playlists, it all has to be done on a PC. You can't do it on the device. So it's interesting that Apple, with an inferior piece of hardware, has managed to get 75% of the market. So how does that happen? How does it happen? Well, some of it has to do with this software. The software is both on Windows and on the Mac that lets you control it because it's fairly slick. Some of it has to do with the fact that you could buy the music online, so now I can wake up from my clock radio, I can hear on the radio station a song that I'm interested in, I can pick up the laptop that's sitting next to my bed. I know that's where yours lives. Not next to my bed. And I can go to the radio station's website and I can find the song and I can click on the buy button, and within a minute and a half I can have it downloaded onto my iPod, right? So that's impressive, right? I can have this stuff right there. They also have all around the world a chain of stores with people whose job title is genius. How many of you have worked with someone who has on their business card genius? So, how they've created this service entity. There is no Zune store, right? You can't go and talk to a Microsoft genius. It even seems a little contradictory. So it's this doesn't exist. And of course, earlier today, we were talking a little bit about fashion. They have turned this also into fashion, right? It became a fashion statement. They started their whole marketing campaigns with people moving around as if they were being electrocuted by these white wires coming into their head. And so it was really crazy. And so now it's this whole thing, right? When a new iPod comes out, people get all excited about it. People want to see it. If you have a new iPod, people want, can I see your iPod? Yeah, sure. Here. Right? That doesn't happen with other pieces of equipment. Nobody says, you want to see my Samsung? No. And please don't ask me that again. So this doesn't happen. Now, here's the thing. Really important people have noticed this. Right? People who are in the executive boardrooms of all the major companies, they've noticed this. They know this is going on. Right? They pay attention to little details. Just little details, right? In the year 2000, Apple, 10 years ago, Apple was not in the music business. Since then, since 2001, actually 2003 when the store came online, they have sold 10 billion songs. 10 billion songs. Okay? This is interesting. They are now the third largest music distributor in the world. They are number one online, which is the fastest growing market. They have a run rate now of 3.5 billion songs every year. This means that they will overtake and become the number one distributor in the next couple of years. See, I'm going to get that. I think it's the air conditioning guy. Just saying. I hope he gets here soon. So it's incredible that they went from not being in the industry to being the leader in less than 10 years. I got to tell you, every boardroom in the world is paying attention to these guys. The other interesting fact is this. They weren't in the consumer electronics business 15 years ago, or they started with the iPod. They sold during the holiday season 20 million iPods. That's almost 3 every second in a 3-month period. Again, they were not in the business. Now they're ruling the business. Every executive is paying attention to this. So if we want to create great design, and we want to sell this up, you want to know why every damn speaker in this conference talks about Apple? This is why every damn speaker in this conference talks about Apple. Okay? Because this is our opportunity. Business people are paying attention to this. They get it. Now's the time. They're not the only ones. This is a company in the United States called Blockbuster. They rent videos. They have stores all over the country. Do they have it in Europe? Is Blockbuster in Europe? Yes? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. So I don't know if they have a particular service in Europe, but in the States they have this service where you can go online and you can pick the movies, and they put the movies in your queue in an envelope, and they send them to you, and you can keep them as long as you want, and you watch it, you send it back when you feel like it. There's no late fees, and after you send it back, as soon as they get it, they send you the next one. And it's an absolutely awesome service if only they thought of it first. Turns out they didn't think of it first. A company called Netflix, which Bill was VP of UI engineering for many years, thought of it first. And again, it's really amazing. In the States, Netflix has done an amazing job of building a customer base. Whereas Blockbuster peaked at 2.2 million customers about a year after they announced the service. They're now down to 1.8 million customers. Netflix has managed to get 12 million subscribers for this service and has now grown to being 3 times the market cap of Blockbuster. So they're 3 times the size of Blockbuster from a... Well, I'm sorry? 14 million. 14 million, okay. My slide's out of date already. I got that off of the last annual report. Damn you guys. 14 million. If I had Larry's pen, I would cross it out. So, they've been able to grow at this amazing rate. In fact, they had 20 contiguous quarters with greater than 50% growth, right? So this is just constantly growing their customer base. And when we were there a few years ago, I got a chance to talk with Leslie Kilgore, who was the chief marketing officer, and she told me that there were 2 variables that they paid attention to, two key indicators. One was that they would go out and they would interview customers who had just signed up, and they'd ask them why they signed up. And it turned out that a full 85% said that they subscribed because some friend or family member just wouldn't shut up until they did. Right? And they also then interviewed existing customers to ask them how often they mention this to their friends. And it turns out 93% said that they kept haranguing their friends and family members to signing up. Now, there isn't a boardroom in the world that wouldn't like to get rid of their sales force and replace it with their customers. And that's exactly what's happening here. What's really interesting, right? So Netflix has 14 million subscribers. Blockbuster has the same service for only 1.8 million subscribers. Blockbuster had this problem, right? Because they started with 55 million cardholders for their stores. Netflix didn't have that disadvantage. So the Blockbuster customers, you know, they had to overcome the Blockbuster name. The fact is that there's this keen opportunity. And here's the really cool thing. Netflix has done all of this with a website. That's it. There's no stores filled with surly teenagers who don't want to help. There's none of that, right? It is just a website. That's the entire customer experience. And they built this business. So this is it, right? If we put a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of money into building great experiences, it works, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, there's another side to this story. There's a large, what we call big box retailer. Those are the large stores that have no walls in them. They have no walls for tax reasons, it turns out. So they have these large stores, and one of them came to us and told us that they had redesigned their website. They'd spent $100 million on the redesign. I'm going to repeat that because I got this one right. $100 million to redesign the website. The day they launched it, they saw a 20% drop in sales. It took them 3.5 years to get back to the point that they were the day before launch. Think what they could have done with $50 million. The possibilities are endless. In Boston, we have this law firm. It has 1,700 employees, 735 lawyers. They decided to switch from their old static HTML intranet to a new, shiny Microsoft SharePoint intranet. Exactly. Oh, so you know of SharePoint, do you? Has that virus had an outbreak in this nation? I'm sorry. You should call the Microsoft genius. The law firm came to a halt. For 4 weeks, they couldn't do anything. Lawyers had to go to judges and ask for a postponement of their cases because they couldn't get the documents off their server. 4 weeks they were shut down. It was pretty much a revolt. And SharePoint is revolting. One of the top 20 internet properties hired a fabulous firm, a firm I love, to redesign their website. These guys worked really hard, and they put together a really great interface. It was fabulous. And they launched it, and the users loved it. It was so much better than what they had before. The old thing was like 10 years dated, and this one was just so much better. It was awesome. The users loved it. Everybody loved it. The only problem was that it took, on the new one, you could do things in 1 click that you used to do in 4 clicks, and since they made all their money from advertising, they saw a huge drop in revenue. So, for the past 8 years, we've been studying how teams create great experiences. And we've been comparing these disasters and people who've been struggling to create experiences against organizations that have been doing it and succeeding. And we've been trying to figure out what the differences were between these two groups. And we've come up with a bunch of them. Some of what we've learned is that there are some critical things. For instance, if you want to have successful experiences, if you want to design them, you have to integrate the users and the business, right? You have both what the users need and what the business needs, and you have to understand both of those things. You can't just focus on one or the other. You have to deal with both. And the best organizations do just that. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico that was put on by the AIGA, which at the time was the American Institute of Graphic Artists. Subsequently, they've changed their name now to just AIGA. I don't get it. But they, I don't know, maybe they're no longer graphic artists or they're no longer American, or I don't know what they are. But nonetheless, they invited me. And it was a small conference. There were about 45 people there. And they pretty much invited every top digital designer at the time. Now, this was back in the 90s, and these guys were awesome digital designers. It was a who's who of great designers in the room. And everybody was a designer in the room but me. I'm not a designer. I've never designed a website in my life. In fact, it's a life goal for me not to design a website. I figure I'm about halfway there. Think about it. Think about it. There we go. So here I am, the only non-designer in the room. I'm the usability guy. And they liked me because I'm a scientist, and I had been talking about how we measure whether designs are successful or not. And they were very interested in some of the things we were measuring, because at the time we were measuring what made people happy and what made people feel something was professional and what made people feel that the site was well designed. And it was very exciting, all this stuff. But it turned out that they invited me mostly so that they could then, after hearing my explanations, tell me all the ways I got it wrong and how you can't measure design and you can't measure emotion, and these are innate human things and they can't be measured, and they just, I'm still bitter. But that's not what I wanted to tell you about. What I wanted to tell you about was the next day. There was this guy who, at the time, was the creative director at Rare Medium, a guy named Gong Zita. Gong, brilliant man. And they had everybody, all the designers who were there, show off the accomplishment they were most proud of. And Gong had brought this work that he'd done. He had taken the existing Wall Street Journal website, and he'd rethought it. And he came up with this whole new idea for what the design should be. And it was brilliant. And I knew it was brilliant because my company had just spent the last year and a half studying how people research financial information to make trades. We studied day traders and momentum traders and buy and hold traders and brokers and amateurs. We talked to hundreds of people, and we spent close to $1 million on this research, and we learned all sorts of things about how people make financial trade decisions. And what was fascinating was that Gong, in walking through his description, had pretty much hit every single thing we'd found in that study. He had obviously figured out the same problems we figured out, and he'd come up with a design that overcame them, and it was brilliant. And I was curious as to how he'd done his research. And so I asked him, I said, how did you do your research? I tend to ask obvious questions like that. And he said, I didn't do any. I said, really? He said, no, yeah, I didn't do any research. I said, well, how did you come up with all of these great things? Because you obviously, I explained to him our study, and you obviously knew this. He says, I don't know, I just sat and thought about it. And I was having trouble with this. Because I can't do that. I can't just sit and think about it and come up with stuff that we find in our research. The reason I do research is because I couldn't think about it. If I could think about it, I could make a lot more money. Charge the same and write the report and then take 4 months off and then hand it in. But that's not all. I have to go do the research, right? And so I repeated. I said, so you didn't do any research? You just sat down, thought about it, and you came up with all this stuff? He goes, yeah. And Alan Cooper was there. Alan Cooper was, you met Alan. He was the guy over here. And he was fiddling with his Nikon camera because I was playing with something. And he was fiddling with Nikon. He's in the back of the room. He says, yeah, Jared, that's what designers do. They think about things. Okay. Now I know. But then it occurred to me. I knew this could work. Because there's actually documented history of this happening. Turns out there's been a lot of work done in the area of determining the sex of baby chickens. You see, here's the deal. What? You cannot tell whether a chicken is male or female until it's about 6 to 8 weeks old. It doesn't show any physical things. I don't know what the Portuguese word for that is. It doesn't show anything. So instead, you have to wait for those 8 weeks. Except there's a group of people who, with 97% accuracy, can do it at 3 weeks, which turns out is very valuable to the chicken farming industry. So they hire these people. They have an official name. It's called chicken sexing, and they determine the sex of chickens. Right? And it's very simple. If you watch them work, it basically the baby chicks parade in front of them, and they go male, female, female, male, male, female, female, male. And if you ask them how they do it, they don't know. It just works. Sometimes they'll give you a reason, but if you actually try and do exactly what they say, you won't be able to do it. Right? They don't know how it's done. However, they can train other people to do it. Turns out the people who are best at this are Japanese. Nobody knows why. But they can train other people to do it. And the way they train people to do it is you stand next to them. And you go, female, male, female, female, male, male, female. And here's the thing, right? In almost any career, when you first start doing it, you start at the lowest level. You start at 0. But in this, you start at 50% accuracy. That's God's gift. And what's really interesting is after the first few weeks, you actually dip. But yeah, so you go female, male, female, male, female, and every time you get it wrong, they punch you in the arm. It hurts. But you get over it. After a few weeks of being punched in the arm, your accuracy, at first it dips and then it goes up, and you can get to about 55-60% accuracy in about 6 months. And then if you really work at it, you can get to about 80% accuracy in a year, and after a couple of years, you can hit about 95% accuracy if this is your chosen career. Right? And it pays well, apparently. For things on a farm, it pays particularly well. And so you can get up to just 95-97% accuracy. And if you don't believe me, there's a Wikipedia article on it. It turns out that this isn't the only thing that follows the same sort of phenomenon. It turns out that midwives, when a mother is about to have a baby about a month out, if you want to figure out what the weight of the baby will be at birth, the most accurate way humanity has come up with yet, more accurate than any equipment we've ever built, more accurate than any ultrasound test we've ever come up with, more accurate than anything, the most accurate thing is to have a trained, seasoned midwife put her hands on the mother's stomach and guess. It's more accurate than anything we have. Nobody knows why. It just works. In World War II, the British had a small problem. You see, there were these planes that kept coming across the English Channel. Half of them were RAF planes returning home from their day's work. The other half were Luftwaffe planes just setting out for their new job. And it was important to the British to figure out which ones were which. They were really into that at the time. And so they had these guys whose job it was to stand on the beach with binoculars, look for little specks in the sky, and as soon as they can, determine whether it was a Luftwaffe plane or an RAF plane. And they were really good at it. They had a really high accuracy rate. But the problem is they also had a high mortality rate because they were standing on the beach with binoculars. And so they were having trouble replacing these people, and they couldn't train them fast enough because nobody knew how they did it. It was just a secret. If you've ever tried to make your own sushi, you will know that it's really hard to make it taste like really great sushi in a restaurant. That's because you can get only so far learning how to make sushi, and then you have to actually spend time with a sushi chef. And there's a whole period that the great chefs spend learning from other chefs. They just stand next to them for 6 months. There's no curriculum. There's nothing that those chefs do. They just work alongside them for 6 months, and after 6 months, they are making better sushi. Nobody knows what happens in that 6 months. It just works. So there's all these things where we can learn how to do things, but we can't explain it. In other words, it's learned, but not open to introspection. And this is what was going on with Gong Zita. It turns out that he could explain his design. He could tell me everything about his design, but he couldn't tell me how he got to the rationale behind his design. He didn't know. And this is something we've learned, that really good experience design is learned, but not open to introspection. And this is a huge problem because how do we train all the designers we need right now if we can't come up with a curriculum, if we can't just train it? It has to happen through some sort of sushi chef-like mentorship program where you just work next to people and it gets better, right? It's crazy, but that's the way it is. Now, we spent a lot of time talking to people who use Netflix. And if you talk to Netflix customers and you ask them, what do you like about Netflix? They won't shut up. They'll just keep going. And the list is huge. They'll talk about how they love not having to worry about the late fees. They love the selection of movies. They love how they have weird little freaky movies that aren't in the store very often, that are just really sort of eclectic and cool. They love how the recommendation system always seems to know what type of movies they're going to like. They have this whole list of stuff. But what's really interesting is what isn't in the list. One of the things that isn't in their list is the information architecture. No one ever mentions the information architecture of the site, even though it's actually pretty damn good. No one talks about, oh, I love the way they organize their categories. Doesn't happen. Right? Nor do they mention the fact that Netflix was one of the first sites to ever use Ajax and has been pushing the envelope on sort of rich experiences ever since day one. And they have incredible work done there. But again, no one ever mentions that. Nor does anyone ever mention that Netflix has been experimenting on and off with social networks, integrating social networks in a meaningful way. So you can invite your friends into your network, and they can see what movies you're watching, and you can send them little personal reviews of the stuff you like that is separate from the other reviews, and all sorts of cool little features like that. They've been playing with that. No one ever mentions that. And the reason no one mentions any of this stuff is because good design, when it's done well, is invisible. It's sort of like the air conditioning in the room. Right? You don't think about the air conditioning in the room unless it's too hot, or it's too cold, or it's too loud, or it's dripping on you. And you don't mention it. I don't know, there's 400 people in this room right now. So between us, we probably have about 1 million hours of our lives that we've spent in meetings. Yet I bet there isn't one person who's been in a meeting at any point in time when someone has said, excuse me, whoever set the air conditioning in the room, you did a fabulous job. I mean, I've been comfortable all day. That never happens. It's been wonderful. I brought a sweater. I didn't need it. It's been great. Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt. We can get back to talking about the layoffs. Good design, when it's done well, is invisible, which is a real challenge. Because how do we put together a portfolio of invisible stuff? Right? The best I can think of is you actually, if you're a great designer, you put together a portfolio of the stuff you didn't do. Yeah, I would never do that. See that? I'd never do that either. I can tell you I'd never do that one. But how do you do it, right? It's got to disappear. In the States, we have an airline called US Airways. If you try to book a ticket on US Airways, part of the ticket booking process involves agreeing to the terms and conditions of that flight. And you have to read 8 screens of this. American Airlines, United is a little better because the person who did their terms and conditions used to program in COBOL. At American, they had innovation. They came up with headings and paragraphs. But this still doesn't make sense, right? This is crazy stuff here, right? Here, I'm going to read you just a small piece of this because it's just wacky. Note, when combined with other fares to form round/circle/open jaw trips, the most restrictive conditions apply. These include minimum/maximum stay/reservation/ticketing requirements/stopover provisions/and cancellation/change penalties/service charges or combination provisions. When 2 stopovers are made, if no combinable fare is available on the shortest sector flown, any 2 applicable one-way fare may be used and on, and it will not take on the conditions of the most restrictive fare. Additional conditions apply. Circle trip, hyphen, permitted. Hyphen, maximum of 2 stopovers permitted. Open jaw, hyphen, single open jaw, permitted at either origin or destination. Hyphen, the mileage of the shortest sector flown must be equal to/greater than the mileage between the points of the open jaw. What the hell does that mean? For those of you who are not native English speakers, let me tell you, I know every word in that paragraph, and I still don't know what it means. Okay. So who writes this stuff? Lawyers, right. And we can't expect... You do? Did somebody raise their hand? He's a lawyer. I thought you shot all the lawyers. Thought you left them in Spain. So, lawyers write this stuff, and we can't expect lawyers to know anything about good design, because obviously they don't spend enough time in school. So they can't know this. Which is why I don't understand what happened over at Southwest Airlines. Earlier today we talked about Southwest Airlines. Right? Turns out that something wacky is happening with the lawyers at Southwest Airlines. I don't know what it is. The only theory I have is that the lawyers must be doing mushrooms. Because this is their most restrictive fare. This is the whole thing. It's written in English. Anyone can understand it. Okay? Or almost anyone. And it's easy. It's a great experience. And the reason it's designed this way is because of the reasons Peter mentioned this morning. That their philosophy is that the gate agent shouldn't have to have a fight with a customer because the flight was canceled and now they have to go on another flight, and because they bought the $3 internet fare, they now have to pay a $20 change fee to get on the next flight. You know, because of those things, they want it to be clear what the restrictions are and what it is, and they want to be able to pull this out and show it to them and walk through it with that customer and saying, look, this is it. This is what you bought. You paid for a less expensive ticket. This is the restrictive fare, right? That's what they wanted. So they have constantly iterated over the design of their fares and their rules to be able to get to that point. So they're taking experience design to every part of their business, to every part of the experience. So this means if we want to build a team that has great experienced designers in it, we're going to have some skills. One of them is copywriting, because that's what we saw there. That's great copywriting. And if we're trying to do it global, it means we have to have global copywriting, which is even more mind-blowing, right? Just how do you pull that off? But we also need to have great information architecture. We need to be able to organize the site well. We need to have a way to manage our designs so that we can iterate over those designs and learn from each iteration. We need to have practices that allow us to get feedback from our customers and see how the design is progressing. We need to understand how to design for the interactions that are included. We have to understand how we're going to take complex data and present it to our users through great information design. We need to have good visual design, which not only worries about the aesthetic, but also knows how to make sure that the most important content is communicated and the less important stuff is a little more subtle in the design. And one that is hardly talked about, but this idea of editing and curation. Someone has to be saying what's in and what's out, and we have to have that on our team too. And I wish I could say that if you had all these things, you would have a great experienced design team. But unfortunately, it does not stop here. Because it turns out that we also have to know how to go out and do research and bring stuff in from the field and learn from that. We have to understand the domains that we're working in, whether it's healthcare or travel or medicine or whatever. We have to understand how those domains work. We have to understand how the business works and how we're going to make money doing just this. We have to understand how we interpret data and all that data that we're collecting, how to interpret it and learn stuff from that. We have to be able to explain the value of what we do to the people who we're trying to give these features to, and make sure that they understand why the features we're creating for them are valuable. Of course, we have to understand the underlying technology and how that works. And we have to know how to explain to our superiors how the stuff we're doing is actually going to pay off in the long run so that it makes the organization money so they can keep going. We have to deal with the fact that everything we do now involves having people talking to people. No longer is it just a person talking to a computer, but it's computers mediating conversations between people. Everything's got social components to it now. We have to be able to deal with the fact that we have to translate all these design ideas into something that can be implemented, and we have to know how the implementation team actually works so that we can be able to serve their needs too. All of this is what you need for a team. And here's the weird thing. Since we've started studying, the number of skills have been increasing, and the sizes of the teams have been going down. So all of a sudden, we no longer can have a single person doing each thing. We have to have multidisciplinary individuals on multidisciplinary teams. And you can see this. This is an image from the Mayo Clinic. This is a picture of a brain aneurysm. And it's an important image if you have a friend or family member who's been diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, because these things are fatal within 30 minutes of diagnosis. And so how you discover why this thing is important to deal with. You have to have brain surgery within 30 minutes most of the time to deal with this. You know, it's incredible. You need to understand it. This image does better than any paragraph of text. But look at how it was drawn. That's the thing that I'm most interested in. Obviously, this person knows Illustrator or something because it's really well drawn. So this person has a great hand and they can do great stuff. But similarly, they also know something about the human form. Well, if you've ever taken an MFA, you know that they don't let you start drawing people. You have to start with fruit. You have to get the advanced classes to draw people. So that's an advanced topic, being able to draw the human form. Most people don't achieve it right off, and to do it this well is quite incredible. But this person also knows anatomy. That's not even taught in undergraduate and in many graduate level art schools. Anatomy is a specialty, and it's very hard to learn on its own right. And then this person also knows about medical science because they've accurately drawn all the medical portions of this thing. This isn't 4 individuals that they hand the drawing to, each person adding a layer. That's not how it's done here. They have one person with a lot of skills. And the teams that we see that are most successful, they have a handful of people who have a ton of skills. So we have to be thinking in terms of skills, not roles. Now, in our research, we've come up with 3 questions that pretty much distinguish whether you're going to be one of those organizations that does great work, create a great design, or one of them that really struggles and doesn't seem to get there. And it's pretty accurate. It's about 85-90% accurate right now. And so the 3 questions we have are this. There's one called the vision question. And the vision question is this. Can everyone on the team describe the experience of using your design 5 years from now? Now, Brian was talking about imagining the future, but we're not talking about imagining the technology or imagining even what the business is going to be like. We're just talking about the experience, right? What's it like to be someone who needs your product or service 5 years from now? Chances are that isn't a whole lot different than it is today. So can I walk up to anybody on the team and have them describe exactly the same thing? Then if the answer to that is yes, that's great. The second question is called the feedback question. The feedback question is this. In the last 6 months, have you spent more than 2 hours watching someone use your or a competitor's design? So I should be able to walk up to anybody on the team and ask them this question and get a yes. That they spend at least 2 hours watching someone use the design. And it has to be within the last 6 weeks. If it's farther out than that, people won't remember. And if it's not 2 hours, they probably didn't see enough of the exposure. Turns out, there's all this debate amongst the user research community about how many users you need for a study. Turns out it doesn't matter at all. It's not the number of users that make a difference. It's the number of hours of exposure that each team member has to those users. So that turns out to be critical. And the last question is what we call the culture question. In the last 6 weeks, have you rewarded a team member for a major design failure? Now, this turns out to be a really interesting one and fairly controversial because people don't like to reward failures. You know, when a company has some disaster, that guy gets to eat alone in the cafeteria for a long time. But it turns out that the organizations that are successful regularly reward failure with a celebration. And the celebration goes something like this. The company goes so far as to bring in music and fancy hors d'oeuvres and good wine, and they get everybody together, and everybody has a little party, and then the most senior person in the room interrupts and says, "Hey, I want to talk about this failure we just had," and they bring up the person who was responsible, and they make fun of him for about a minute, maybe 2, and he takes it, he's fine with it. And then they spend the next 20 minutes talking about every lesson they learned because of this. Things they probably wouldn't have learned had they not done this. And how valuable it turns out this will be going forward. That they now know a whole bunch of stuff about their users, about their business, about their designs that they didn't know before. And that rewarding a failure turns out to be critical. So it's these 3 questions. If you can answer yes to all 3 of these, you're likely to be in a successful company. If you're 2 or more, you can't answer yes to, you now know what to work on. So that turns out to be key. So what I wanted to talk to you about here is that successful experience design integrates both the business and the user. It is not open to introspection, but it is learned. It is invisible. It's multi-disciplinary. It has a whole cultural component to it. And it's something that we're still learning more about every day, and we're getting better and better. And with that, I want to thank you for encouraging my behavior, and enjoy the after party.